You are now drifting into the far future, where stars burn cold in a galaxy full of shadows. Tonight, we follow the trail of a lesser-known brotherhood. Their armor is bronze and scorched. Their oaths are whispered like prayers, and their battles are fought not for glory, but for quiet redemption. They are the Fire Lords. A space marine. Chapter lost in the folds of time, kept alive only by the stories of survivors and the silence they leave behind. This journey is not full of loud triumphs or cheering crowds. It is a tale told in ash, carried by the wind across forgotten worlds. The Fire Lords do not shout. They do not boast. Instead, they burn slowly, carrying the weight of their choices like glowing coals in their hands. As you listen, you may feel your thoughts soften. Let your breath follow the rhythm of the void. This is a story meant not to wake your mind, but to let it wander, to soothe your sleep with flame and silence. A gentle descent into a deeper world where fire does not destroy, but purifies. Let us begin with the prologue, a soft place to rest your understanding before we step into the fire. In the vast universe of Warhammer 40K, Space Marines are superhuman warriors. They are created, not born, made to protect the Imperium of man from aliens, heretics, and horrors that words cannot always explain. Every chapter of Space Marines has its own story, its own colors, its own code. Some are known across the stars for their victories. Others stay in the shadows, fighting hard battles that are rarely remembered. The Fire Lords belong to that second kind. They are one of the many chapters formed after the great wars of the past. Each new chapter was made to protect more space, to guard planets that had no help. The Fire Lords were made during what is called the 23rd Founding. That moment in time was hard. The Imperium needed warriors who could do more than win. It needed those who could hold the line when hope was nearly gone. The Fire Lords were built from the gene seed of the salamanders. That means their bodies were shaped from the same seed as those fire-loving warriors. But while the salamanders are famous for protecting civilians, the Fire Lords grew into something else. They were more distant, more silent, more focused on the idea of paying a deep price to protect others, even if no one ever knew. They live on a planet called Clementia. It is not beautiful. It is harsh, covered in black rock and rivers of lava. The sky there is thick with smoke, and the ground shakes from storms deep under the surface. But to the Fire Lords, that world is a teacher. It shows them how to survive, how to become strong, and how to accept pain without complaint. You will hear about that world again, and you will hear about the trials that the Fire Lords go through. They believe in fire, not just as a weapon, but as something spiritual, something that burns away weakness and leaves behind what is pure. They do not fear flame. They walk into it again and again, because to them, it is the path towards something greater. This story will follow two paths. First, we will learn who the Fire Lords are, where they came from, what they believe, what they do. Then, we will follow them on their last crusade, called the Pyre Crusade. That journey may not end in the way many tales do, but it still has meaning. It still matters. Take your time with each part. You do not need to understand every term right away. Just follow the rhythm. Let your thoughts move like ash on the wind. The Fire Lords are not loud, and neither is this story. Let the silence guide you as we begin Chapter 1. To understand the Fire Lords, we must begin with their birth, though not in the way humans are born. They came from a moment of fear in the galaxy, a time when the stars themselves felt dim. The Imperium of Man had suffered great wounds. Wars had left planets broken. Whole regions of space had fallen into silence. People needed defenders, not ones who fought for praise, but ones who would arrive when no one else would. The Fire Lords were made for that purpose. This moment came during what is called the 23rd Founding. It was not the first time new chapters of Space Marines had been created, and it would not be the last. But this founding was different. The Imperium had learned that not all threats can be faced with pride or strength alone. Some needed warriors who did not seek fame. Some needed those who would walk into darkness and remain there, holding fast until even the faintest hope could survive. And so, the Fire Lords were shaped. Their gene seed, which is like a piece of another warrior's essence, came from the Salamanders. The Salamanders are a proud and noble chapter, known for their love of flame and their care for civilians. They value life, and often stand between the weak and the cruel. But the Fire Lords did not follow that same path. They took the fire, yes, but not the warmth. They took the strength, but left behind the open hand. From the very start, the Fire Lords chose distance, both from others and from praise. Their homeworld, Kelamentia, speaks to the kind of warriors they became. It is not a place where things grow easily. The surface is made of blackened stone. There are rivers of lava that glow even in the darkness. Firestorms sweep across the plains without warning. The sky is often covered in smoke that turns the sun into a dull red light. This world is not welcoming, yet it is full of life in its own way. Not the green kind, but the kind that survives no matter what. Kelamentia does not teach through comfort. It teaches through trial. When young warriors are chosen to become Fire Lords, they must first live through the trials of this world. They are not taken away from danger. Instead, they are placed in it. They must learn how to breathe air that burns. They must learn how to move across rock that cuts their feet. And they must learn to fight not for themselves, but for the idea of something larger. Pain becomes a teacher. Fire becomes a guide. These trials shape their minds just as much as their bodies. This is where their belief in the ember begins. To the Fire Lords, an ember is more than just heat. It is a memory of fire. It is what remains when the flames are gone. They see themselves as embers in the void, carrying the last warmth of a dying fire across a cold and cruel galaxy. This image helps them understand their place in the universe. They are not the flame that dazzles. They are the spark that endures. As their chapter grew, the Fire Lords built their fortress monastery deep inside one of Kelementia's mountains. This place, half buried in volcanic rock, is not meant to shine. It is a place of silence and study. Its halls are filled with statues of warriors long dead, their armor covered in layers of ash. It is said that the ashes are collected from battlefields across the stars and brought back home as a way to honor those who gave everything. Even in rest, the Fire Lords choose stillness over splendor. Unlike many other chapters, the Fire Lords do not celebrate victory with loud cheers or great feasts. Instead, they gather quietly. They sit in the glow of sacred flames and speak of duty. They remember the fallen not as lost, but as parts of a larger fire now returned to the source. This way of thinking helps them remain steady. In a universe where so much is broken, they hold on to the idea that sacrifice has meaning, that every loss, though painful, adds light to something greater. Over time, the Fire Lords earned a certain name across the stars. People began to call them Redeemers. though they never asked for such a title. They were often the ones who came when others had failed. When whole worlds were crumbling, when the last message sent out was one of fear, it was the Fire Lords who answered. They did not promise survival. They did not promise hope. But they did promise to stand. And sometimes that was enough. They fought in many wars, though few records remain. Part of that is their own doing. They do not care to record victories for others to see. Instead, they keep simple logs. These logs speak more of the people they protected than the enemies they destroyed. The Fire Lords fight not for glory, but for balance. They are the ones who restore what can be saved and burn what must be forgotten. Their enemies are not just Xenos or traitors. Sometimes their enemy is the fire within, the part that tempts pride or anger. Their place among the wider Imperium is quiet. Other chapters know them, but few work closely with them. The Fire Lords keep their distance. They do not join long campaigns unless the cause touches their deep sense of duty. They do not seek favor from the High Lords of Terror. They do not argue for more resources. In fact, many believe the Fire Lords would continue even if the Imperium itself fell silent. They serve not because they are told to, but because they have chosen to. And so we find ourselves at the edge of their history, where ashes gather and the flame begins to flicker. The Fire Lords were never meant to last forever. Their numbers are few. Their world is harsh. Their ways do not bring new recruits quickly, yet they remain. Like embers carried by the wind, they move through the stars, bringing a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of safety, but the peace of knowing someone still stands when all else has fallen. As we move forward into the next chapter, we will look more closely at their inner rites, the deep customs that shape how they fight and how they remember. We will step into their sacred places, where the soul pyres burn and the silence speaks louder than any war cry. To truly know the Fire Lords, it is not enough to learn where they came from or what battles they fought. Their real story is found in the rituals they keep and the silent vows they whisper to fire. This chapter is not about combat, not directly. It is about belief. It is about how the Fire Lords shape their lives around flame, not just as a weapon, but as a guide. To them, fire is not destruction. It is cleansing. It is memory. And it is rebirth. From the moment a recruit sets foot on Kelementia, the path toward becoming a Fire Lord begins with trial. These are not tests built to prove strength alone. They are made to test the soul. A young recruit may be dropped into the lava plains without gear or food. The sky above may already be dark with ash. The ground may shift without warning. Each step forward could bring pain or death. But this is not meant to punish. It is meant to teach. Those who survive do so not just by skill, but by learning to let go of fear. This stage of training is called the Ember Path. The name is simple, but the meaning runs deep. The Ember Path is not marked by signs or rules. Instead, each warrior finds their way forward through instinct and endurance. The path winds through firestorms and sulfur pits, over cliffs of black glass, and past boiling rivers. A recruit might walk for days without seeing another person. The silence is part of the test. It forces the mind to face itself. When a recruit finishes the Ember Path, their body carries scars, but more importantly, their spirit changes. They no longer see fire as something to run from. They see it as something that speaks, something that warns and watches and waits. This shift in thought prepares them for what comes next. The rite of the soul pyres. The soul pyres are sacred. They burn in the deepest halls of the Fire Lord's mountain fortress. These fires are never allowed to die. They are fed with sacred oils and ash, taken from battlefields across the stars. Each pyre stands for one of the ancient heroes of the chapter, warriors who gave everything and left behind no body to bury. Their names are spoken in whispers during each ceremony, but only by the chaplains, who act as guardians of memory. When a recruit finishes their training and earns the armor of the Fire Lords, they are brought before the pyres. This ceremony is not loud. There is no music, no drums. The only sound is the fire itself, crackling low and slow. The chaplain speaks softly, reminding the recruit of what they now carry. Not just armor and weapons, but the legacy of those who walked before them. The ashes of the pyres are placed across the armor by hand, not as decoration, but as a promise. The warrior is now part of a chain that stretches across centuries. As a Fire Lord grows in rank, they take part in many rites that connect them back to these flames. One of the most important is the ash binding. This is done before a great battle, or when a mission seems likely to end in death. A warrior will kneel before a pyre and remove a small vial from their armor. This vial contains ash from a fallen brother. The warrior mixes this ash with oil and places it on their weapon, their chest plate, and their helmet. The act is quiet. It means they carry the strength of the fallen into battle. It means they are never alone, even if no other warrior stands beside them. Another rite, though rare, is the Ember Vigil. This happens only when a warrior is near death but still clings to life. If they cannot be saved, but they are not yet gone, they are placed beside a pyre. The fire is adjusted to burn low and warm. The warrior is not spoken to, not touched. They are simply left to listen and to reflect. It is said that many pass peacefully, their minds soothed by the voice of the flame. Weapons, too, are treated with care and meaning. The Fire Lords favor tools that use heat and melt, like flamethrowers and melter guns. But they do not see these tools as only for harm. They see them as an extension of the cleansing fire. When a weapon is first crafted, it is not taken into battle right away. It is first placed before a pyre and left for a full day and night. A chaplain watches it during this time. If the weapon shifts or burns strangely, it is rejected. But if it burns clean, it is kept. Each weapon receives a name, often tied to a place or person now lost. The chaplains of the Fire Lords hold great power, not because they lead with loud words, but because they carry the spirit of the chapter in their quiet steps. They are called Ember Priests. Their armor is black with red trim, and their helmets are shaped to look like empty flames. They speak little during war, but their presence alone can calm a room. Many say that Ember Priests feel the fire in ways others cannot. They can sense when a warrior is nearing the edge, when doubt begins to take root, or when a flame inside is close to dying. When a warrior falls in battle, the Fire Lords do not bury them in the ground. They are returned to fire. Their armor is placed on a stone bed, and the body is laid upon it. Ash from the soul pyres is sprinkled across the chest, and a final oil is poured over the brow. Then the flame is lit, not by machine, but by hand. A living brother must strike the first spark. As the body burns, a chaplain speaks the rite of ember return. These words are not meant to say goodbye. They are meant to remind the living that the fire grows with each sacrifice, that the light will continue because someone chose to burn. Through these rites, the Fire Lords find strength, Not the kind that shouts or breaks mountains, but the kind that lasts. In a universe full of madness and war, they choose to believe that every act of courage adds to a greater warmth. They do not ask others to follow. They do not spread their beliefs with force. But in their silence, in their flames, there is a message. That even in the darkest places, the smallest fire still matters. As we move to the next chapter, we will see how these beliefs shape the way the Fire Lords fight. Not just the weapons they use or the enemies they face, but the way they move through battle, the way they choose to defend, to hold, to burn not with rage, but with purpose. The Fire Lords do not choose easy battles. They do not wait for clean orders or perfect timing. Most often they arrive when all hope is nearly gone. Their ships do not announce themselves with bright signals or proud banners. They drift in quietly, like smoke on the edge of a burning world. When they land, it is usually on soil that has already seen too much pain. By the time they act, the people below have already given up. That is when the Fire Lords fight best, when there is no one left to cheer, when there is only silence and the fading pulse of a dying world. This pattern repeats again and again across their history. They are drawn to places that others avoid. Wars where there is nothing left to win, only ground to hold or lives to save. These campaigns are long. They drag on through slow battles, scattered resistance, and ruined cities. The Fire Lords do not break through walls with loud charges. They move with quiet purpose, picking their fights with care. They do not waste life, even their own. But when the time comes, they do not pull back. One of their early battles became known as the Pandraxian Subduals. This was not a war of glory. It was a conflict where a series of planets had fallen into chaos, their leaders lost to strange voices and false dreams. The people no longer trusted one another. Fire burned in the streets, not from war, but from fear. The Fire Lords arrived without warning. They landed across the system at once, in quiet pairs and small squads. They did not speak to the people. They simply acted. They moved through cities with care, removing threats before they grew. They rebuilt power lines and food stores. They helped without asking for thanks. The people called them ghosts made of fire. Another remembered campaign was known as the Grief Crusade. That name did not come from the Fire Lords themselves. It came from the survivors. The war was against a group of heretic leaders who had twisted the hearts of many. Their weapons were not just metal and flame, but words and lies. The Fire Lords moved through the conflict like a slow breath. Each step forward was heavy. They took no prisoners, but they did not kill without purpose. At the end of the war, only a few of them stood. An entire company had fallen, burned down to a handful. Still, the people of that sector remembered them not with fear, but with a strange kind of comfort. They said the Fire Lords had cried smoke instead of tears. Perhaps the most unusual record comes from a war near the Orphean Passage, where a Xenos threat had taken root beneath the soil of an agri-world. Other chapters refused the call. The enemy moved without sound, striking from the shadows and vanishing before it could be seen. The Fire Lords accepted the call without question. They landed their ships in a ring around the largest hive and set fire to the outer fields, not to destroy crops, but to deny the enemy cover. Then they waited. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, the Fire Lords moved inward, burning ground and sealing tunnels behind them. By the time the last of the Xenos surfaced, there was nowhere left to hide. The world was saved, though its fields were blackened. The Fire Lords stayed just long enough to show the workers how to start planting again, then left without a word. The way they fight does not come from pride. It comes from belief. The Fire Lords see themselves as shields, not swords. They do not race into glory. They stand firm when all else breaks. Their goal is not to destroy the enemy alone, but to outlast them. This is why they often suffer great losses. They do not retreat easily. They do not abandon a mission just because the odds shift. Some call them stubborn, others call them foolish. But those who survive because of them often use different words. They call them fire that never went out. Compared to their gene fathers, the salamanders, the Fire Lords act with colder focus. The salamanders are known for rushing to defend the innocent, for protecting those who cannot fight. The Fire Lords still value life, but their way of serving it has changed. They see themselves not as saviors, but as martyrs. They accept that not all can be saved. They believe the greatest gift they can offer is not rescue, but a chance for others to survive just a little longer. This quiet idea sits at the center of everything they do. Among Imperial commanders, this behavior is both respected and feared. When the Fire Lords arrive, many see it as a sign that the situation is worse than it seems. They bring no promises. They do not demand command. They simply arrive, assess, and act. Some say they can sense the moment a world is about to break. Others believe they follow signs from beyond, that their chaplains listen to the stars in a way no one understands. It is not unusual for them to vanish after a campaign ends. No speeches are made, no medals accepted. They simply board their ships and fade back into the void. Their fortress monastery remains distant. Few outsiders are allowed to visit. Fewer still return. The chapter communicates only when needed, and even then their words are few. Despite their quiet ways, the Fire Lords are not without feeling. They grieve their dead, though not with tears or sorrowful songs. Instead, they carry the memory of each fallen warrior into battle. A name scratched into armor, a line spoken before dawn, an extra step taken when exhaustion begins to rise. These signs are not for others to notice. They are small fires held within. What is most striking is how they treat their losses. When a battle ends and their numbers are low, they do not rush to refill. They allow time to pass. They choose new recruits with care. This keeps their chapter small, but it also keeps their spirit strong. They do not fear vanishing. They fear losing their way. The idea of duty runs through their hearts like a quiet pulse. Not duty to command or to tradition, but to the people who will never know their names. The Fire Lords accept this truth. They understand that in a galaxy full of loud voices and grand banners, sometimes it is the silent ones who hold the line. Now that we have walked beside them in battle, we will move into the shadows they cast. In the next chapter, we will step into their thoughts, their isolation, and the slow decline that comes not from war, but from the weight of their own path. The Fire Lords burn not just against the enemy, but against time itself. The Fire Lords do not fear death, but what truly sets them apart is how they live. Their silence is not only found in war, but in the quiet halls of their home, in the long moments between battles, in the way they face the stars alone. They are not a chapter that seeks to grow large. They do not build strong alliances. They do not chase influence. Instead, they hold to something deeper, a belief shaped by fire and solitude. Calementia is not an easy place to call home. Its sky glows red with smoke. The ground breaks open with heat that rises from the planet's heart. There are few safe places. Even the mountain where the Fire Lords have built their fortress is far from calm. The stone shakes with deep rumbles. Fire spills from the earth during long nights. Yet this world reflects what the Fire Lords feel. It is harsh, but not cruel. It demands respect, but it teaches strength. It reminds them that life, even in the worst conditions, can endure. The fortress itself is carved into the side of a volcano. Most of its halls are underground. The deeper one goes, the warmer the air becomes. The walls are smooth and dark. Fires burn low in the corners, giving just enough light to move. There is no echo. No sound lingers in the halls. It is a place built for thought, not for show. Every chamber has a purpose. Every stair leads somewhere useful. Time moves slowly there, not because it is heavy, but because it is full. In these spaces, the Fire Lords reflect on what they are. They speak of duty as a quiet fire, one that must be fed, but not flaunted. Their chaplains guide these thoughts. They do not preach in loud voices. They sit beside their brothers and listen. They remind them of why they fight, not for reward, not for pride, but for something older, a promise made in silence, sealed in ash. This kind of thinking does not draw many allies, yet it has kept them true to themselves. Their beliefs are shaped by the idea that fire can cleanse, not destroy. In battle, they use fire to remove what is corrupt. But in peace, fire is also a light, a way to see through the dark. To the Fire Lords, every warrior is a candle in the void. Alone, that light may seem small, but together it can guide even the lost. This image is simple, but it helps them stay focused when the galaxy grows cold. That same image leads to their quiet isolation. Other chapters often share resources, call for aid, or trade wisdom. The Fire Lords rarely answer such calls, not because they think less of others, but because they believe their path is different. They see themselves as watchers of the edge. They take positions no one else wants. They go where others will not. They speak only when needed. Some say this makes them cold. Others say it keeps them pure. Still, there have been moments when the Imperium tried to draw them closer. Messages have been sent. Envoys have visited Kelamentia. These attempts are not met with anger, but with calm resistance. The Fire Lords thank those who reach out, but they do not change. They will not speak more than needed. They will not open their vaults or reveal their secrets. Even those who come in peace are kept at a distance. This is not done out of pride. It is done out of care. They know that to stay true, they must walk alone. Some within the Inquisition have raised questions about this silence. They wonder if the Fire Lords hide something, if they drift too far from what is expected, but no proof has ever been found. The Fire Lords remain loyal. Their gene seed remains stable. Their actions, while slow, bring results. They do not fall to chaos. They do not turn their backs on the Imperium. They simply move to a rhythm others do not hear. Yet that rhythm carries a cost. Over time, their numbers have dropped, not through great losses alone, but through choice. They do not rush to grow. They do not push young warriors into war before they are ready. Each recruit is tested beyond the body. Their soul must carry the fire. If it does not, they are not cast aside, but they are not raised to join. This slow path means that losses are not easily replaced. The Fire Lords accept this. They believe that even if their chapter fades, their light will echo in others. Inside the chapter, there are quiet debates. Some think they should change, that they should speak more, grow faster, link with others. But the older warriors hold steady. They remind the young that the candle does not fight the dark by burning fast. It fights by lasting. Their chaplains repeat this message in soft tones. The young listen, though some still wonder. Among the Fire Lords, leadership is shared with care. No one voice speaks too loud. Decisions are made with time. The chapter master does not rule from a throne. He walks the halls like any other, speaks with calm, and acts when needed. His armor is no brighter than the rest. His blade no heavier. What sets him apart is not his strength, but his calm. That calm shapes the chapter from within. The few who have fought beside the Fire Lords speak of them with a mix of awe and confusion. They do not understand why these warriors are so silent, why they do not celebrate or share tales. But they also do not forget them. In the worst moments, when the battle turns and hope starts to slip, the Fire Lords hold. They do not fall back. They do not panic. They do not ask for help. They simply stand, as if the flame inside cannot be shaken. This strength is not loud, but it is steady, and it leaves a mark. Whole sectors speak of them with reverence. Pilgrims whisper stories of glowing armor in the smoke, of voices that spoke only once, but carried truth, of warriors who fought, then vanished, leaving only ash and silence behind. These stories grow, not because the Fire Lords tell them, but because others do. So as the chapter remains apart, its name still drifts through space, not in grand songs, but in quiet prayer, not shouted in war halls, but passed between survivors. The Fire Lords do not chase legacy. They let it form slowly, like embers settling into stone. As we leave this chapter, we now turn toward the deeper flame, the one that led the Fire Lords away from Kelamentia and into the stars for one final purpose: the Pyre Crusade. It was not asked for, it was not ordered, it was something they felt, a call they could not ignore. There are moments in the galaxy when something stirs quietly, like a breath in a deep cave. These moments are not marked by alarms or grand signs. They begin slowly, felt first by those who listen more than they speak. For the Fire Lords, the Pyre Crusade did not begin with a command. No order was sent, no council met. It began with a silence that pressed harder than usual, a weight that settled across their chapter like a cloak of ash. And in that stillness, they felt a change. At the time, no one outside the Fire Lords knew what was coming. Their fortress was quiet. Their halls gave off the same soft glow, but something had shifted. The soul pyres burned a little brighter. The chaplains walked with deeper focus. Words were fewer. When spoken, they came with purpose. Even the youngest warriors noticed the change, though none could name it. The Ember priests spent long hours in the inner chambers, reading old texts, whispering in front of the flame, walking alone across the black stone paths carved deep into Kelementia's volcanic rock. The shift began not in war, but in vision. Chaplain Dren Valharis, one of the oldest still walking without aid, entered the deepest pyre chamber and did not return for 3 days. When he stepped out, his armor was covered in new markings. These were not made by hand. They looked burned into the plates. The shapes were curved like smoke or script. No one asked what he had seen. In the Fire Lords, vision is not questioned. It is accepted, then carried. Soon after, the Fire Lords began to gather their warriors, not with rush or command, but with still hands and soft signals. Veterans returned from distant posts. Recruits were tested earlier than usual. Ash was taken from every pyre, sealed in vials, placed inside the armor of each warrior. The armorers worked in silence, tuning flame weapons and blessing old relics. The ships were loaded, not with the full chapter, not with every tool, only with what was needed. What they brought could not be measured by weight. It was shaped by purpose. They did not name this act until the last moment. When the ships lifted from Kelementia's surface, the message sent was brief. It spoke of fire, of cleansing, of duty. It ended with 3 words: the Pyre Crusade. Then came the silence. No further signal followed. The Fire Lords had vanished into the stars. They left no path, no timeline, no promise of return. To some within the Imperium, this act was troubling. Chapters do not go to war without approval. They do not vanish without record. But the Fire Lords had never followed the usual path. Their goal remained unknown for a time. Only later would pieces fall into place. The region they traveled toward was near the edge of Segmentum Tempestus, a part of the galaxy that had grown unstable. Reports had faded, communication lines had gone dark. Ships sent into the region often failed to return, and strange readings began to appear. Psychic echoes, movement without sound. Something had awoken, something hidden. Whether it was a new Xenos threat, a rising warp anomaly, or something older, no one could say for sure. But the Fire Lords had felt it. They had sensed a growing cold, a place where their flame might be needed. Dren Valharis led the crusade. He was not called a leader in the formal sense. The Fire Lords do not use titles in that way. But his voice had weight. His presence shaped the rhythm of the fleet. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was through short phrases that sounded more like poetry than speech. Others began to call him the Ash Saint, not because he asked for such a name, but because his presence became something sacred among them. He carried the ashes of 3 full companies within a sealed urn on his back, ashes from past battles, warriors who had not been buried, only burned. This urn was not a symbol, it was a vow. The fleet moved through space like a shadow across a dying fire. Their ships were marked only by flame symbols, old and worn. They gave no signals. They did not reach out for allies. They passed through dead systems, paused at ruined outposts, gathered fragments of data. Along the way, they found evidence of loss. Whole planets blackened, cities emptied, space stations drifting with no crew. But not every place was dead. Some worlds still burned. And on those worlds, they made their stand. One such place was Vale Fee. The planet had once been used for deep mining, with cities built into the cliffs. When the Fire Lords arrived, the world was halfway gone. Fires raged across the lower levels. A strange sickness had spread among the population, one that seemed to twist not the body, but the mind. The Fire Lords landed without delay. They split into pairs, moving from sector to sector. They burned entire tunnels, sealed parts of the city, and brought down bridges to stop the spread. They did not pause. By the time they were done, half the city was gone, but the other half stood. The sickness was stopped. The Fire Lords left no names behind, only ash and stillness. From there, they moved deeper. More worlds were visited. Each time the result was the same. Fire used to stop what could not be reasoned with, to cleanse what had become lost. These were not battles of glory. These were choices made in silence. Each victory came at a cost. Warriors were lost, equipment was burned, but the fire never stopped moving. The Fire Lords believed this crusade was not just for war, it was a form of penance. Not for failure, but for the weight of what they had become. Over time, they had seen too much, fought too long, stood too often in places others would not go. The Pyre Crusade was their answer, a final act not of power, but of cleansing. They were not trying to win. They were trying to finish a promise. Even as their numbers thinned, they pressed forward. The Ash Saint gave no orders to stop. The fleet moved slower, yes, but it never turned back. Reports from astropaths who tried to trace them spoke of strange dreams, visions of bronze figures walking through flame, of ash falling from the sky, of soft voices speaking in unbroken lines. Some believed these were signs of doom. Others believed they were prayers. Now that the fire has been lit, we will follow it further in the next chapter. There we will walk alongside the Fire Lords as they reach deeper into the crusade. We will see the worlds they burned, the enemies they faced, and the meaning behind the silence they carried. The deeper the Fire Lords moved into the unknown, the fewer voices followed. Reports stopped reaching nearby sectors. Long-range messages faded into static. No maps tracked their path. They had entered a region swallowed by silence. Yet their mission never slowed. Each world they reached carried new scars, not always from war, but from slow ruin. Disease without cause, madness without pattern, structures standing without people. It became clear that something was spreading ahead of them, though it had no clear shape. Still, they moved forward, not to conquer, but to cleanse. The Pyre Crusade found its heart not in victory, but in fire. On each planet, they left more ash than metal. Their goal was never control. It was removal, the kind that cuts out what is sick to save what remains. That way of thinking shaped every choice they made. The blade was used when fire was not enough, but the fire came first. One world still remembered was the Hollow Gardens. Once a green planet with long rows of trees and soft winds, it had changed. When the Fire Lords landed, the forests had twisted. The leaves glowed with dull light. The roots moved without sound. No birds flew. No animals stirred. The humans who lived there were gone, their homes left open as if they had stepped out for only a moment. Deeper into the forest, the warriors found things that no longer seemed real. Shapes that looked like people but were made of bark and skin. They did not speak. They did not breathe. But they moved, just enough to be seen. The Fire Lords set the trees alight, not in rage, but with focus. Each flame was placed with care. The fires spread in slow lines, cutting across the strange growths, surrounding the dead cities, and guiding the blaze outward. They did not stop to search for survivors. There was nothing left to save. They worked in silence. When they left, the forests were ash. No signs remained of what had once walked among the trees. The ground was black. The sky above held no color. It was done. Criffin's Reach came next. This place had once been a trade station, set in orbit around a dead moon. The station had grown over time, layer upon layer, until it looked more like a hive than a vessel. No signal had come from it in years. The Fire Lords arrived without warning. They boarded without sound. Inside, they found only dust and long corridors, dim with low power. At first, it seemed empty. Then they saw the walls, covered in script, strange symbols carved deep into the metal, and further in, the bodies, all facing outward, frozen in place. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Their eyes had been sealed with wax. It was not clear what had caused it. No enemy waited. No fight followed. But the Fire Lords saw what needed to be done. They set the outer levels to detonate, then moved inward, placing charges and sealing chambers. Before they left, a single flame was lit in the command center, not to destroy, but to remember. Then the station was reduced to fragments. The moon behind it glowed briefly, reflecting the fire before it faded once more. Through all of this, the Fire Lords lost many of their own. Not all died in battle. Some vanished. Others collapsed without cause. One dreadnought was found cold, its pilot still in place but unresponsive. There were whispers among the survivors, not fear, but a sense that they were moving into a place not meant for voices. The silence around them began to echo, yet still they continued, not because they had no choice, but because they had already chosen. The weapons they carried began to wear. Flames flickered lower, melter charges burned less clean, ash built up in the joints of armor. But none of this stopped them. The Ash Saint walked at the center of it all, still carrying the urn, still guiding with quiet strength. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain. He simply moved forward, and the Fire Lords followed. Some of the final worlds they reached showed signs of something older, not war, but worship. Stones carved with broken circles, monuments half buried in dust, patterns that repeated in ways no one could explain. These places felt wrong. The air bent slightly. Shadows moved where there was no light. The chaplains walked ahead in these moments. They sang soft chants, their voices low, their feet bare. The others followed slowly, weapons at rest, as if loud action would make things worse. In these places, fire was not enough. The chaplains used ancient rites, burning symbols into the earth and marking their armor with sacred oil. The warriors did not speak. They held fast, even when their minds felt stretched. Some did not return from these missions. They were not seen again. Their names were etched into metal plates, then dropped into the pyres without ceremony. This was not meant to forget them. It was meant to return them to the fire. The reports that reached the Imperium were fragmented. Messages drifted through the warp, half broken, carrying phrases that felt like prayers. No requests for help, no cries for aid, only words about light, about loss, about the need to burn what could not be kept. Scholars tried to piece together meaning. Many failed. A few believed the Fire Lords had found something that did not belong, something older than war. Perhaps not a threat in the usual sense, but something that broke the balance of the galaxy in quiet ways. Through it all, the Fire Lords never turned back. They knew their numbers were falling. They knew their strength would not last. But they also knew that their duty was not to survive. It was to carry the fire until it could go no further. Each step they took was a promise. Each world they touched was marked not by victory, but by the choice to stand. As we reach the next part of their story, the fire grows dim. The weight of what they faced begins to show. Their numbers fall lower. Their ships grow cold. Their purpose sharpens. The final stands begin. The Ash Saint speaks one last time, and the Pyre Crusade draws toward its closing light. The Pyre Crusade was never meant to return. That truth settled quietly over the fleet as they moved deeper into the stars. No one said it out loud, No warrior raised the thought. But it was there, resting like a hand on the shoulder. The Fire Lords had made peace with it. They had never set out to win in the usual way. They were not chasing enemies across space. They were walking into the dark, knowing full well that each step forward meant one less behind them. Their numbers had thinned, not by some great blow, but through many small losses, each one leaving a gap that could not be filled. When the crusade had begun, they had moved in full strength. Not the entire chapter, but enough to act with weight. By the time they reached the world of Mournvale, only 3 companies remained, and even those were not full. Veterans led small squads. Dreadnoughts walked beside warriors who had barely finished their rites. The Ash Saint remained at the center, still silent, still carrying the ashes of those lost. Mournvale was different. It was not a dead world, nor was it fully corrupted. It was caught in between. Something had landed there, something that moved below the surface. The sky above was always grey, never fully light. Reports from the planet's edges spoke of creatures without shape, swarms that left nothing behind. The local forces had tried to resist, but failed. Their last message was broken and faint. A single word came through: hunger. The Fire Lords knew what it meant. A tyrannid tendril had found its way into the region. It had come silently, feeding slowly, spreading under cover of ruined systems. If left unchecked, it would grow. It would reach farther. It would take more than just one world. And so they chose to stop it here, not through retreat or redirection, but through a final act. They landed with care. No banners were raised, no speeches were given. They moved across the ruined fields, placing charges, setting fire lines, drawing symbols in the dust. Their goal was not to save the world. It was to hold the line long enough for others to see it, to notice, to act, to mark this place in time. The battle began in silence. The creatures came not as an army, but as a wave, endless, without fear. The Fire Lords did not scatter. They formed a ring around the central ridge. They let the swarm come. Flame met hunger. The air turned hot. Black smoke rose into the grey sky. For a moment it looked like they could hold. Then the second wave came, faster than the first. The outer squads fell. The lines broke. Still, they did not fall back. In the center, the Ash Saint stood with the last warriors. His armor was cracked. The urn on his back had begun to glow. Some say it had opened, that the ashes inside rose like dust, wrapping around the warriors still standing, that the dead had returned in a way no one could see. Whether this was real or only seen by those near the end, no one knows. But the effect was clear. The Fire Lords fought with the strength of those long gone. They held the ridge for 5 more hours, long enough for Imperial ships in nearby sectors to notice, long enough for others to act. When the end came, the last Fire Lords set their own lines ablaze. The flames climbed fast. The ridge vanished in light. No bodies were recovered. Only scorched metal and a single plate from the Ash Saint's armor, marked with a simple symbol. A circle of fire broken in one place. After Mournvale, no signals came from the remaining fleet. Their ships were listed as lost. Some in the Imperium considered them gone. A chapter faded into silence. A name that would be remembered for one act and then fall into legend. But the truth is not that simple. In the years that followed, strange reports began to surface. Not often, not loud, just whispers. A patrol ship caught in a fight it could not win was saved by a bronze figure with a flame across its chest. A world under attack found a group of unknown warriors standing in the smoke, who vanished before the enemy could regroup. In each case, no name was given, no sign was left, only the faint scent of burned air and a path cleared by fire. Some say the Fire Lords are not fully gone, that what remains is not a chapter, but a memory made real, that the last warriors became something else, not ghosts, not angels, just embers, still burning where they are needed most. Others say a few still walk in dreadnought armor, carrying not names but ash, that they no longer speak because their voices are filled with too much loss, that they arrive only when the dark grows thick enough, and when they leave they take nothing but silence with them. There are still arguments in high halls about what should be done. Some believe the Fire Lords should be declared gone, that their name should be sealed, that their banner should be placed among those lost to time. Others say they should be honored, that a shrine should be built, that their path should be taught to new chapters as a warning or as a light. But in the quiet corners of the galaxy, far from these debates, stories still grow, told by those who have nothing left, who faced ruin and survived. Not because of some great army, but because of a figure who stepped through the flame and stood between them and the end. As the Pyre Crusade reached its close, the Fire Lords did not burn out with fury. They did not vanish in hate. They chose their final steps. They carried their own ashes. They knew the fire would not last forever, but they also knew that what it left behind could still matter. And as we leave their story, let that final image stay with you, not as a loss, but as a promise that someone chose to stand, that someone burned, not for themselves, but for others, and that even the quietest fire can light the way.